So I get asked quite a lot about our maps and how we put them together, both for like our adventure races and then also on our tracking pages. What software do we use and how do we get all the information in there and those types of things. So I thought I'd put a couple of videos together, and they're not really tutorials on how to use the software, but just kind of a big picture on the way that we put our stuff together. And it's really in two parts. I'm going to run through the first part, which is kind of how we assemble all the data into one spot. And the second part is really how we make it look pretty. And so there's two applications that we mainly use for that. And the first one I'm going to cover is Caltopo, which is an online mapping program, and we use that to kind of put all our information together. So I've been doing maps for a long time, and I'm not really map making, as it were. I'm kind of assembling data into maps and using different maps and mashing them all up to find to create a map that's pretty and gives the information that is needed for the particular use case. And so I've used lots of different things in the past, from Google Maps, Terrain Navigator, Nat Geo had a mapping application for a while, and so lots of different pieces of software over the years we've used to pull this stuff together, and kind of ended up using Caltopo. I used a paid version. I'll have explained some reasons behind that. And then the other application that I use is an application called QGIS, and that will be really part two. And so we use that to assemble data as well. So just to give you a really quick overview of Caltopo, it's an online application. You can go to caltopo.com, pull that up, and really all it lets you do, or what it is capable of doing, is have multiple layers of different map data, and then lets you put markers, polylines, and different vector entities on top of the map that are geo obviously located in the right spot, to start creating a picture of what you want people to know about a particular area or what you're doing. So normally with an adventure race, we're adding checkpoints. If I'm doing something with one of my tracking maps, I'm probably adding stuff for aid stations or checkpoints that people will be going through. And then we'll also overlay on top probably route choices and those types of things. So I'll give you a quick overview of how to add those features. And what I'm going to do is kind of base it on Shenandoah Epic course that we did this year. And so I'll kind of roughly also kind of talk about how we place stuff. And really one of the key things about doing maps is data, continuing data all the way through the process. So you're drawing a picture on a map, you're verifying that in the field, so that's exactly where it is, and then you're pulling that back into a map, and then you're making it look pretty, and then you're outputting onto a piece of paper so people can use it and follow it on the ground. So I'm going to kind of explain how we go through that whole process. So inside Caltopo, we have lots of different layers we can use. They have a really good layer called their base layer, and if I look around, that's kind of showing footpaths and roads and terrain and topo and those types of things. It's a great map to use as a base. We can also change different types of maps up here. One of my favorite is that we use for a lot of our base maps, if they have that area, is the Forestry Service map. And these are basically different map bases that are available that you can use. Now you can see as I zoom out on my forestry one, I don't have lots of different areas. It's basically a Forestry Service map that only covers forestry area. If I switch back to the TF open source outdoor map, you're going to see that covers a different area there. So there's lots of different base maps that I can use, and they really help me start figuring out where I want to put my checkpoints if I'm doing an event, or just assessing the terrain and those types of things. Then on top of that, I also have some additional layers that we can turn on and off. In the paid version of Caltopo, a really important layer that we use a lot is parcel data. And so this actually shows me who owns what piece of land. So this is really important when you're designing a course, or you want to make sure you stay on public land, or if you're going across private property, who owns that. So this is a super important layer that I use quite a lot. The other layer, and you've got public lands too, which is super helpful, and it shows me what is public land, what is forestry, BLM, state land, those types of things. And the other layer that we use a lot, and this is for our tracking side, is our cell coverage layer. So we're able to quickly do an assessment for people if they say, hey, I want to do this particular race, can you track it for me? All our trackers use cell data, so I'm able to quickly come in here and assess the particular areas that may have cell coverage or not have cell coverage, and we can say yeah or no, yes or no, or going to have to use a satellite tracker. So these types of layers that we have in here have a lot of data that we can start assessing stuff. So when I'm starting to design a course and looking at data, I won't kind of talk about course design because that's another kind of subject, but I'm going to kind of look at a thing. I'm going to have come up with a plan of like, well, I want to do this. I've got a leg, want to start off with this leg, this activity. And so let's take the Epic, for example. We started off with a trekking leg. So I looked at this particular map, and I kind of probably started with this layer. It has really the good footpaths on it. And I started to decide where I wanted to put my route in a big overall picture. So a really cool thing that you can actually do inside Caltopo is trace and draw along lines, and this gives you a good idea about distances and those types of things, and really helps you set up a kind of a general course and distances, and starts working back into course timings, and I'll briefly talk about that as well. But what I'm going to do is say quickly I'm going to add a line, and let's call this quickly trek. And another really important thing to do inside Caltopo is really start organizing your data, and either using colors or folders and those types of things to organize your data. So I'll generally set my lines up for trekking to be green, so I can quickly look at it. I know it's a trekking section. Red for biking, blue for paddling, and then that's actually goes across to all our tracking stuff. When you look at our tracking platform, those are the different types of colors we use to indicate an activity. So what I'm going to do is actually say I want to snap to my base layer here, and then all of a sudden it magically turns on snapping, and I'm going to say, well, I want to start my trek in this location here, and it's going to start automatically tracing for me. I know this area is private property. I want to come down to here. We know that we wanted to take people up here and along this particular route here, and we'll drag this all the way down to where we knew that we wanted to come and do the put in for the boat, which was down over here. And all of a sudden I've got my line. I'm going to click OK to finish that up, and I've got my route now in here. So I can start looking at some stats for this. I quickly click on it. I'm going to quickly look at my profile. It's going to start giving me my elevation, gain and drop, and my total distance. So what we actually use, or what I use, is a spreadsheet, and I'll start putting these distances in. I'll start doing an assessments where it's easy, medium and hard. I have a generic kind of formula that I use for the speed, whether you're paddling or trekking or biking on the different types of terrain, and then that really starts helping me build out my schedule for my race. So I know my fastest time for this leg may be 3 hours, slowest time will be 4 hours. If that doesn't start working with the overall course, I can start making this longer or shorter. Once again, that comes back into course design, and that's another beast in itself. So generally now I know I want people to go along this route, and so now I need to start putting some checkpoints to determine, okay, I want them to go this way. So I'll come in here and I'll start adding some checkpoints, and I'll look for some features. So okay, let's say I want to add this checkpoint. Let me just edit this one. I've dropped one in here. I'm going to put this location, we'll put it up in this re-entrance, so we know people have to go and look for it there. And I may start calling this a label. Now usually what I'm going to start labeling a lot of my stuff is via a leg number and then a checkpoint number within that leg. And the reason I do that is because if you have a big course that has, say, like 40 checkpoints, and you go and add and remove a checkpoint 1, 2 or 3, it messes up your whole sequence all the way through, especially when you're designing a course to start off with. I'm going to call this checkpoint 1-01. right? And I'll just click OK, and that gives me my label there for that. And let's say I want to come up here and, well, let's do one. I'm going to visually put one maybe on this high point. So I'll do another one, add my marker. Let's call this 1-02, and these checkpoints will probably change the numbers. Just re-edit that and move it to where I want it, roughly on this high point. I'll put it there. So I'm going to work through my course, putting my lines in, putting my checkpoints in, figuring out how many I need really to go along the route. And that's kind of like how you start building that out. Now, if you're doing an O course, that's a little bit different. You'll go in and start doing the features. So the important thing for this is, now I've kind of visually done it on the map, I'm going to go out in the field and I'm going to locate these points and I'm going to flag them and I'm going to see if it's a suitable location. And you kind of generally need a big picture how you're going to do your design. If you just were to go out into the forestry and just wander around and look for cool places to put checkpoints, it would take you forever and you would never get a course built. So you kind of build out a big overview of a course, generally put the checkpoints where you want them to be, and then you're going to go back out into the field, verify those locations, and while you're out in that area you may find something in this particular spot. Like I go out to 1-1, I'm navigating around there and looking around and I find a cool feature and I'm going to move that. So the next big thing that we're going to do is actually, and this is the cool thing about Caltopo, is start using a mobile app. So imagine I've just done my layout, I've kind of got my checkpoints where I want them on a map, and I've got my course done and my timings done and all those types of things. And next thing I'm going to do is go out and look at this stuff on an app and make sure I'm exactly in the right location. And I'm also going to start matching it up to what people are going to be looking at on the map. So not always, if I have a point that's located in a GPS location, when I go out in the field, the map may look slightly different. So where I've set this point, and I think it's exactly in the bottom of a stream, and I'm looking at it here, when I get out in the field, it may be actually just off to the side or a different location when I actually physically get there. And so it's really important to have this information in sync, and I can do that with the Caltopo app. So I'm going to pull that up really quickly. So on my phone I have this app, and as you can see, as I've actually been drawing this stuff on the desktop, it has been coming into my app for me. And so now I'm out in the field and I actually will have myself located. I can use this button here on the map and it's going to physically GPS locate me where I am. So I can generally now walk out to wherever, and I'm now navigating this on my mobile device, on my iPhone. I can go out to checkpoint 101 and I can walk around, and maybe I'm in the field and I find out that it's not quite where I want it. So what I'm going to do is edit it, and I say, well, maybe I found a cool feature that's just down from where it's located, and maybe I didn't want it that far from the trail. So I'm now physically locating where that is out in the field, and maybe at the same time I see that it's going to be stream, if I can spell here, stream left bank or something like that. So I'm actually out in the field and I have my description that I actually want for people to be able to find this particular checkpoint. I'm there visually on the ground and I've moved my location to that particular point. Now the beauty of doing that, you may have seen that on the back, that has automatically updated my Caltopo map on the back end. So now my data that I'm collecting in the field is synced directly up to the map that I'm going to be creating my maps for. And if I click on this now, you can see my description has come in here. So it's two different activities I'm kind of describing. I've sat down, done my map in Caltopo on my desktop in my nice warm house. Now I've gone out with my Caltopo app on my phone. It's already synced up all the data that I've just drawn, and I can go out now, identify my checkpoints, move them around, add descriptions. We usually take photographs of them too when we're out in the field, and then I'll flag them with a ribbon if I'm not setting it at that point. then I can come back and then reassess that in my map. At the same time, when I'm looking at this in the field as well, let me pull this back up. I know that maybe I'm going to be using my Forestry Service base map as my map that I want people to be navigating off. And so I can actually come in here, and I know I'm probably going to use my white one. The reason we do that is for it doesn't use much ink when we're printing. And now all of a sudden I can see the exact map that everyone's going to be using when they're out in the field. And that's where my checkpoint is, and that's how people are going to navigate to. So that's kind of how we start tying our data together, so it's all synced. Now, there's other ways to do that. People use Gaia GPS, and they'll go out to use Gaia. They'll set their checkpoints. They'll export it out as a GPX file. That gives you one piece of data. They'll import that into another mapping application. And now they can move the points around. Now they export it back out to GPX, upload it to in the field. And so you end up with this inconsistent data, and it's super, super easy to miss a checkpoint on your map or something if you're locating in the field, and then it all goes wrong. Or it's out of sync, or your description changes and you forget to update that description in your map, and then it doesn't make sense. And so this is what I do to ensure that everything is kept as in sync as possible. So now we've got our points, and what I'm going to do is, the other beautiful thing about Caltopo is we can save and import and export a lot of stuff. So I already have a file that's built out that shows all my information that we used when we built out our map for the epic. So we'll pull that in, and you can see here these are all our checkpoints and my legs and those types of things, and we'll go ahead and import that into here. And so from Caltopo, once we have all this data in here and we've added some color to it and started to make it look a little bit more pretty, and I'll go over some other stuff that we've got going on here, we can actually create our maps in Caltopo, print them out, and use them for a map for a race. So I will have some other stuff in here. You can see my overlay of all my routes that I thought people were going to take, or the way that I did want people to take when they were out on the course. I've taken all those distances, I've banged them into my spreadsheet, worked out my timings, know that the fastest teams are going to take about 24 hours, and those types of things. This is how you make your 12-hour race a 12-hour race, your 24-hour race a 24-hour race. It's this figuring out how long it's going to take people to do things and guiding them where you want to go with the checkpoints. So some quick things on this map. You can see that when we went out, and this is the other verification we do, is when we went out and we set checkpoints or we flagged them on our Caltopo app, we turned on tracking. So I can see exactly where I went to, and I can verify that this is where I went to and set this checkpoint or flag this checkpoint in real time. So that's kind of a nice little feature. You turn on tracking and you can kind of you're basically drawing exactly where you went along the map. So we end up with those types of things. A lot of my stuff is here. I don't have a whole lot of stuff in here as I built it out, but I usually use different folders inside here to organize my information as well. I've got my no travel lines that I've put in here, so this is the areas that I definitely know I don't want people traveling on the roads. And this data for these legs is what I use to pull out on my tracking page. So when you pull up the tracking page, you can see, rather than just lots of dots that really don't tell a story, if I'm watching from home and I want to know what's going on with the adventure race, if I just put up all the checkpoints on the page, it makes no sense. It's super hard to follow. So we use different colors and we do the routes, and that really helps tell the story about what's happening with inside the event. So what we'll do is just turn off some of this stuff, and we can easily turn off this information on each of these layers just by unchecking my data on the side here. Maybe I don't want to show some of this other stuff that I just created. We'll turn these guys off, and I kind of end up with just my checkpoints on the page. And so this may be a map that I want to produce to give to my participants. I said, well, my forest service layer, I'm actually going to use the white one because I know when I print it out, I don't want tons of extra green on there to be printed. And then the other thing we'll do, we'll turn on our no travel layers, because we know that we don't want people traveling on those roads. And then from here, what I'm going to do is create some maps. And so what we're going to show after this is, you can see here my maps for my forestry end, right? And so I have to turn on a different layer to have some kind of mapping under here. And I think so we ended up using, I think, Caltopo for that, and that puts it underneath. But what we're going to use is QGIS to start mashing up lots of different data and actually create our final maps. But if you don't want to get into QGIS and you just want to throw your maps out from inside Caltopo, that's pretty easy. I can come over here to my print function, and it kind of gives me a really awesome screen here that says, okay, you want to print your pages on 11 by 17, a 1 to 24,000. We're going to create you a PDF for this, and we're going to do it at 200 DPI. I can add a title if I want at the bottom. So we'll do that. Okay, I want to add some grid lines for UTM only, or I can add lat longs if I want to. And let's go ahead and see how we can start mashing this up, right? So in this particular case, all my map is not going to fit on 111 by 17. So I can say, okay, my first page is going to be here. Let me add another page. Page 2 is going to be maybe down here. I can cover a little bit more of the course down here. I've got a pretty good overlap there with my map, so I'll bring that down here. Then I knew that we're going back on the paddle up this way, and so really you can start to build out, your map. I think we did something like this. I can't remember the exact layout, but it's a little bit of an art of laying out your maps, so you get all the data covered and you do it in as few sheets as possible. So let's say another page here, and I won't do them all. I've got some overlay there. I know I'm getting all my route in. We'll do another page here. Try and cover everything. I don't want that gap in here, so let's pull that back over this way, pull this back over this way. And you'll see we do this a little bit differently in QGIS, and it gives us a lot more flexibility. Let's do an outer page, and look, we can set this to landscape to cover my top bit. So I think now, okay, all my maps cover this area. I know I've got some stuff over here. We'll deal with that when we start working with QGIS. But let's say I just wanted to dump this out on my map builder topo layer. I've got my whole course built out. I'm going to go ahead and say generate generate PDF, and that's going to generate all my PDF sheets. And if I wanted to, from this point, I could hit print, and that would generate a set of maps for me. So we'll just let this go ahead and do its processing here and get this stuff kicked out. And while we're waiting for that to process, we can come back over and look at some other quick features inside here that are super useful. So any of my checkpoints I can look at, and I can get the different coordinates from it. So here I've got decimal, lat, and long, and also down here I've got UTMs and a description. So any of this stuff can be easily copied out to a different application. If I want to change my coordinate systems, that's underneath my settings here. I can choose between all these different coordinate systems, and I can have dual coordinate systems running at the same time, which is super useful. If you are doing anything where you're a race director and you want to do plotting of points, super easy to come in here, pull all my UTM coordinates from here, and have people plot them if I want to do any kind of plotting. So there's lots of different stuff that I can do in here with my different coordinate settings. So now it's generated out my different maps. and you can see it's given me a nice index page, kind of a broad overview of the different maps. And then if I click through each of my maps, it's going to have given me my maps, my start and finish, my different checkpoints. Of course, I've got my route lines disabled and turned off, so we can't see them on this particular map. But as I go down through, it's drawn a nice scale for me. It's done my declination for me, told me my zone, and so these are pretty decent maps that it's put out on 11 by 17 or 8.5 by 11, and it's produced this pretty nice map set for me. So that kind of wraps up the Caltopo component of this. The next video that I'll post will be about how we can pull this information and start to make the maps into our final maps. That gives us some more branding, certainly a little bit prettier, lets us mash up some different maps together with QGIS.